Hello, welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Damien. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, we are here at the end of the year.
Yes, we are.
So today, as promised, we have a special episode. We're going to reflect on the year we've spent doing this podcast, all 48 episodes. This is 48, so I don't know if it counts, but here we are. We're going to talk about some of our top moments and highlights we've had throughout the year and be based on something meaningful we read or watched or a moment on the podcast itself, in front of the mic or behind the scenes.
Yeah, so to do this, we've each prepared a list of 5 moments that stood out to us individually, so we could come here together at the table and discuss them. And we, as we do every year, we haven't shared our list with each other.
That's
so
correct.
There could be some overlap.
Yep.
But we love this because it's really been and always is a great reflective exercise on all the work we've put in this year on the podcast and certainly all that we've learned.
Yes, and if there is any overlap this year, we will employ an air horn so that you are well aware that we have done some overlap. So, yeah, that'll be fun. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the episode.
Yes.
It's always such a nice way to revisit what we've learned this year, what we've discussed on the podcast, and all the work we put into making this thing happen each and every week, even the weeks we don't make it happen.
Yeah.
And to boast about our great year. So, how about I start?
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Sure.
I'll start with my number 5, and then we'll trade back and forth.
All right.
Okay. Great. So my number 5 is steady growth. So this has been a year of steady growth of subscribers and followers on different platforms. So YouTube, we've seen an increase. Spotify, we have more subscribers than we've had before. We've grown on new platforms like Blue Sky and have more followers there. There's a little bit more. There are more people who are aware of what we're doing. So that's nice. I think it's nice to see our work translate into more people seeing the work and or hearing it. And yeah, so I just that's my moment, because I've been watching those numbers, I don't know, with some gratitude for people translating what they see from us into subscribing or following or what have you in the different apps and platforms.
Absolutely.
So
I love that. We're not going to deploy the air horn. There's a part of what you said in there that relates to one of mine, but it's not fully closely related.
Well,
so
I'm almost done. So maybe this will be.
Oh, okay.
I have one extra. No,
yes,
that's okay. I want to tag onto that.
You looked at me and I thought you were dead.
Sorry, I'll stop looking at you. I also want to say that it's always nice to see authors or directors share and engage with we post online. And I always feel very grateful to them when that happens, because I know people have a lot going on. They don't have to do that. And so I'm always very appreciative when they engage in some way and, say hello or say thanks or whatever it is. And so that's another little extra piece of steady growth, and I think that's contributed somewhat to our steady growth as well. And 100%. So I'm grateful because people do that and they share, and it leads to more people seeing the stuff that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, so this is part of what you said that's related to one of mine, but the concept and what you said is definitely an honorable mention for me. We've grown this thing a lot, and more eyes are on it. And I'm so glad that we're on Blue Sky now. It's such a beautiful space to be a part of, and that has helped tremendously in terms of getting this podcast of ours out there. And so, yeah, the growth we've experienced has been incredible. So I love that. Glad you brought that to the table. All right, so speaking of things you bring to the table, I like that. My number 5 moment and highlight from this year, when I look back on sort of everything we've brought to the table, is I love the fact that we read a ton of pieces from the incredible publication that is Hammer and Hope.
I knew you were going to bring that, so I didn't write it down.
What?
Yeah.
Stop it.
I had that thought. I was like, we did a lot of Hammer and Hope stuff.
We did a lot of Hammer and Hope stuff this year.
I knew you were going to say that.
I love it. Okay, good. Well, it's an amazing publication that's rooted in so much of what we believe in: solidarity, transformative justice, liberation, and it always offers us such incredible wisdom and analysis, and most importantly, I think the opportunity to have really great conversations about the pieces for our podcast. And those conversations have been a real highlight for me this year. So that's why I put it on my list. So I went back and looked as a quick recap. This year we read a piece by Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor on why the Black class matters, a piece by Derek Purnell about Dr. King and how we can simultaneously hold his support of Israel in his time with the need to demand a free Palestine today. We read a piece by the great Angela Davis reflecting on the importance of standing in solidarity with Palestine. We read a piece by Barbara Ransby about her time organizing as a college student and what we could learn from that. We read a piece by Olufemi Taiwo about this idea of direct democracy as an alternative to what we have now in the States. And most recently, we read a piece by Rachel Herzing, Amelia Kirby, and Jack Norton about how the criminal punishment system and fascism go hand in hand. So yeah, that lots of incredible pieces from Hammer and Hope. And I feel like every time we read something, we were like, it was hard to pick a piece, and there's so much more that we didn't get to read from them. So just a huge thank you to Hammer and Hope and all of the folks there for the work that you do and what you produce, and also being a supporter, as you just mentioned, a supporter of our podcast in so many ways. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to engage with Hammer and Hope.
Yeah, they've been releasing such great stuff and very helpful to sharing things when we post them. So appreciate that. All right, so my number four. Moving on to the next one is Lakota Nation versus the United States.
See, and I knew you would pick that one.
So this was such a great documentary that I learned a lot from, and it changed some of my perspectives on what liberation looks like, and how and illuminated more about how the U.S. government continues to dispossess indigenous people of their land, of their cultural practices, of all of it, continuing the settler colonial project.
Right.
This film clearly illustrates that. It's very, very powerful, and I'm glad we got to watch and discuss and learn from all the Lakota people who are featured in the film through interviews, and all the elements of the film are so great and highlights so much about what's wrong with the settler colonial project that is the United States.
Oh, yeah. I think in so many ways, the documentaries that we have been able to bring to the table have been so illuminating. And that is one that probably rises to the top. Yeah. And I learned so much from it as well. And it was so great. So I'm glad you brought it. I believe you brought it to the table for us.
It's up there for me with Exterminate All the Brutes that we watched before. And just in terms of just how educational and informative it is, and perspective shifting.
Yes, I think. Absolutely. All right, that's a good number 4. My number 4 moment and highlight from this year is actually 2 incredible pieces that we read from In These Times magazine about 2 very prolific Black women writers. Yeah. The first was a piece about Toni Morrison's essays. They were Peril and Racism and Fascism, which were all about the creep of fascism, what that looks like, and the concept of and the context of dissent. And then the second piece, a week later, was about June Jordan's essays, Life After Lebanon and Waking Up in the Middle of Some American Dream, which reflected on Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982 and the backlash that the women who condemned it faced, and the importance of coalition building across difference. And, and I'm sure you remember this, what was so incredible about those pieces was the fact that the lessons that Toni Morrison and June Jordan offered in those essays were still 100% applicable today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I went back and sort of listened to what we talked about in one of my applications from those episodes was about how important it is to fight fascism at all costs. And June Jordan's Life After Lebanon essay, she spoke to this beautifully, and I wanted to pull this. She said, quote, "As a child, I was taught that to tell the truth was often painful. As an adult, I have learned that not to tell the truth is more painful, and that the fear of telling the truth is the most painful sensation of a moral life." And that quote has stuck with me to this day. And I so appreciated getting to take those essays in and learn from them this year. And so that made those essays in particular a highlight for me.
Yeah, those were great. So illuminating and so powerful too, because I remember they were written in such a way, particularly the June Jordan ones.
Yes.
They were written very differently than most of the things that we read. And so I also appreciated that in terms of the way that she's writing and engaging with these ideas is different because she is primarily a poet, I believe. And so that it had, the essay had a different feel.
Right.
Which was really beautiful.
Absolutely.
So my number 3.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, we're at now. Okay. My number 3 is learning the concept of necropolitics from No Nation on No Map.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a very particular piece of No Nation on No Map that I'm bringing here. This is something we learned about this year, obviously, and I cannot help but find more opportunities to bring it up.
Yes.
Because now I see it everywhere.
Yes, you do. Yes.
And so as a refresher, it is the use of social and political power to dictate how some people may live and how some must die. And it accurately describes so much about the ways our systems of white supremacy, capitalist, imperialist patriarchy operate. And it talks like it's about settler colonialism. It is about all of the things that we talk about and unpack here, and all of the systems that we've learned about. It describes all of them in this holistic way. It's about who gets to live and live well and who must die at the expense of other people living well. And we talk about it when we talk about the disposability of prisoners. We talk about when we talk about the dispossession of indigenous people of their lands and of their cultural practices. We talk about it with the violence of police. We talk about it with everything.
Yes.
And so I've just really appreciated having that additional lens of necropolitics and understanding that the purposefulness of it as well. I think that's the element for me that is crucial, is these are particular choices that reestablish the hierarchies of white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist patriarchy, and all of the processes, all the things that reinscribe the hierarchy of who gets to live and who must die.
You want to go ahead and hit that buzzer for us?
Yeah. You got necropolitics on there? Necropolitics. That feels weird, but here we are.
That does feel weird. I'll let you hit it because my number 3 moment is actually the book in general. But in my notes I wrote, and this is the book that introduced us to necropolitics, and Aaron fell in love with talking about necropolitics. So I think the air horn is justified there.
Yes.
My number 3 moment when I thought about the year in totality was the fact that, first of all, we read 11 books this year.
We did.
Which is one more than we read last year.
Hey,
growth. And that's just awesome. And I'm really proud of us for doing that. But one of the books that stood out to me the most was our February book, which was The Nation on No Map by William C. Anderson. And I really learned so much in that book about necropolitics, but also about, his central argument that radical Black anarchism is the pathway to Black liberation, right? And how Black anarchism and autonomy is a powerful way to fight capitalism and state power and state oppression and certainly white supremacy. And one of the things that stood out to me in the book was this big question that I believe he asked towards the end of the book, where he says, when is enough enough? And I feel like, given all that we've experienced this year since reading that book in our politics in life, that question is everything. When is enough enough? And, this book also made really clear to me the connection between that question and the absolute need for abolition. So the Nation on No Map was a definite highlight for me this year.
Yes, it's a great book.
It is.
So glad that we read it.
Yes, and I love this exercise because that took me way back to February, and I got to sort of re-listen to our episode and revisit my notes, and I was like, I want to revisit this book because it was so good. So and necropolitics
and necropolitics. All right. Well, that was number 3. So let's talk about my number 2.
Okay,
is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm keeping track here. So I have got two books here, combining them a little bit because thematically they're two sides of the same occupation.
Oh.
So Palestine Laboratory and Their Borders, Our World.
Okay.
I think learning more about Israel's occupation of Palestine through these two books and a lot of articles and other things that we read was important this year. It helped me learn a lot more about the history of the occupation and how things have happened there, and also about the experiences of people like in present day, sort of, and exploring the depths of the ways that Israel uses Palestine as a place to battle test their technology that then they can ship around the world and sell it. It highlights how they use the occupation to generate a profit.
Yes.
And then learning more about the occupation through the words and experiences of Palestinians in Their Borders, Our World gave us the human dimension of it and we understand how people are impacted through their narratives.
Right.
Which I think was a powerful way to continue that process of learning more about how this settler colony, how this set of necropolitics continue to, how they operate and then how they impact people, I think is an important thing that I think we do fairly well here, where we think about the systems, but we're also trying to think about what's the actual human impact here. And I think doing both and bringing both of these books is an element of that work that I think we try to do. We're thinking about both systemically, but also interpersonally and personally. How are people impacted by the things that are big and hard to comprehend?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, those are really powerful books. And in some cases, I think about them as, you're right, there's sort of two sides of the same coin, two sides of the same issue, but sort of one felt very intellectual and one felt very personal in a lot of ways. And there was just so much rich learning that we were able to do from those books. So I love that. I love that we've got books on the list here, a lot of books. My number 2 is yet another book that we read this year. And so, first of all, I think that speaks to just how many incredible books we read this year.
Yeah.
So the other book that I'm naming as a highlight this year is Solidarity. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's my number 1.
That's your number 1. Wow. Okay. So the full book title, Solidarity, the Past, Present, and Future of a World-Changing Idea by Leah Hunt Hendricks and Astra Taylor. And this book is a highlight for me for a number of reasons. One is because we actually got to meet Leah and Astra at a book talk in DC, and we got signed copies of the book from them. And it was just an incredible event and experience. And I'm so glad that we got to go into DC, go down to Union Market and to do that. I also loved the conversations that we got to have about that book. We stretched it over 2 episodes, which is always a great thing. And, learning about the power of transformative solidarity, especially over the course of history, was really great. Leah and Astra said in the introduction of the book, they said this, and I wanted to share it because it was so great. They say, quote, we are interested in what we call transformative solidarity, the kind that propelled the fight for civil rights along with other movements that have sought to expand the circle of inclusion while also altering society's very character. Unless we indicate otherwise, this is what we mean when we use the word solidarity, the force that achieved universal suffrage, won the 8-hour workday as well as the weekend, made the modern welfare state viable, defeated Jim Crow, enshrined disability rights, and much more. Solidarity has stretched across the globe, linking abolitionists in the 19th century, national independence movements in the 20th, and activists agitating for the cancellation of sovereign debt in the 21st. It is the tie that binds women, queer, and trans people, as well as workers and debtors, fighting for equality and freedom today. Transformative solidarity is both a means and an end, the process of struggling together and a way of describing a kind of society that is more just and mutualistic. And it's that part at the end for me about transformative solidarity being both a means and an end that just gives me so much hope for the continued work ahead and also for what's to come. Yeah, so this book was an absolute highlight for me.
Yeah, that was my number 1, Solidarity.
I love that.
Because I think it's the epitome of our show.
Yeah. Oh my
I
gosh.
think that it's such a great book, illustrates the work of interdependence through solidarity. And so I have another quote too that's very brief.
Yep.
So they say, at the heart of transformative solidarity is the conviction that both people and systems can change. And I think that captures so much about what our show is about.
Yep.
And how we continue to unlearn and learn on our podcast here. And I think how much we cling to hope in people and in change. We talked about that just last week's episode about Angela Davis and the hope that she holds on to, that things can change, and that's otherwise she probably wouldn't continue to do the political work that she does. And I think I think solidarity provides that hope. It gives me the energy to keep doing stuff, to keep doing work, because we recognize that a better world is possible. The conviction that both people and systems can change.
Yes. Oh man, look at that. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, so where are we? This always confuses me.
You got to share your number one.
My number one.
That was my number one, solidarity, and so now it's your turn.
All right, so moment number one. So my moment number one is calling back to your number 5. So mine's not really a moment per se. It's more of a feeling, and that is pride. I'm so incredibly proud of us for producing yet another year, a 4th full year of Interdependent Study. It's incredible, man. And so when I sat down to sort of look through all that we did this year and think about my highlights and looked at everything we read and consumed and talked about this year, I just found myself sitting in this pride, right? And thinking about how proud I was. Last year, we hit 100 episodes, right? And this year, we've gotten ourselves super close to 200 episodes, which is just wild and amazing. And so, I'm proud of us for continuing to do this and for all of the hard work we pour into it. I'm proud of the choices we make. I'm proud of the episodes we put out into the world. Proud of our social media presence and that we've grown there, and we're on Blue Sky now, we're on Patreon. And I'm especially proud of all the great work you've done with our TikTok. So thank you for that. I'm proud to see that our listenership and our streams and our followers have increased. And we saw that with our Spotify Wrap this year. And so, my number one is just that I'm really proud of us. And I wanted to say that and name that. And, I think I probably say this every year at this time, but I'm really happy and proud that we get to do this together, my friend. So that's my number one. This whole damn thing is a highlight for me and of my year.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I think to be proud of. I think we do a good job.
Yes.
I think it's good to recognize that.
I love it.
Oh, yeah. All right, well, that's it, right?
Yeah.
That's it for the year.
Yeah.
We'll see you all next year.
In
sometime.
2025.
2025. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what I'm going to ask you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating or review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram and TikTok. Check us out on YouTube. Sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. And we'll talk to you next year.